This is the t-shirt that I'm planning to use, and it's not terribly damaged, but somehow it ended up with some little tiny holes down here that are just frustrating. And so I have another t-shirt, and this one has a complementary color, and it has a round neck, and I actually prefer the V, so I'm going to put this one inside this one, and I'll show you how to do that a little bit later. But basically, you need a t-shirt and another t-shirt, or if you have pieces of leftover fabric, that works too. Today on Mindful Making and Moving, I want to share with you a t-shirt remix project where we're going to use materials that we already have, including t-shirts, and reuse them in a new and interesting way that was inspired by the work of Alabama Channon with stenciling and hand stitching and cutting out on jersey fabrics. And so the mindfulness piece of this is taking advantage of the situation that we're in, where we're really being asked to think creatively and a lot of times trying to use what we already have because it's difficult to go out and get things. And so I have a t-shirt that I love. It has some holes. I could throw it away, but so many t-shirts get thrown away. I could give it away, but it has holes, so it's not really a great candidate for that. But it is perfect for using to create something new that I'll still be able to wear, and will save that t-shirt from ending up in the trash. So before we wrap up, I want to share some moving tips that you can incorporate with this project, and I also wanted you to see the finished look. And so we're using our hands a lot, and especially I've noticed as I get older, my hands get tired faster, and so that tells me that they need a little bit more love. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's make fists and just rotate your fists in both directions and just work out some of the kinks and the stress that builds up there. The next one, and you can wiggle your fingers while you're at it. The next one is let's give each finger a little range of motion stretch. And the other thing I would just be aware of as you're doing this, you can do this, I'm standing, but of course you could do this seated. The other thing to be aware of is your shoulders. Are they creeping up by your ears? Try to keep them down and relaxed, because a lot of times we build up tension there too. So give them all a little bit of love. And of course you can spend as much time as you want on this. And then the last one let's do is we're going to do reverse prayer hands. So this is normal prayer hands. We're going to turn the outsides together and see if you can keep your fingers, the backs of your hands, your thumbs touching. You'll notice your shoulders might start creeping up, and you also might notice if you try to pull down too far, you might start spreading. So find a place where you can feel a comfortable stretch, still touching though. And this is something that more you practice, your range of motion will increase and you'll be able to come down lower. But try to keep them touching and try to keep those shoulders down. So happy moving while you're making. So the next step is to figure out your design. And the traditional way to do this would be with an actual stencil. And Alabama Channon uses fabric paint and puts the stencil and paints and then uses that as her guide to stitch and cut out. I have stencils. I don't have fabric paint, but you may not have stencils. So I wanted to show you some options. I found this freestencilgallery.com, and then I also made some images on my computer using Google Slides, or you could use Word, just one of those like add a shape, or you could find clip art online. So you have some options, or you could freehand if you're adventurous. And of course I want the one that's the most complicated. So I want to do this lotus. If I was doing something, a little more simple, then I wouldn't have to worry about where these end up placed. But since I'm doing this one, they're going to have to be in certain places. So I think I'm going to actually color code for myself. And I'm going to be using embroidery floss later. If you didn't have embroidery floss, you could use crochet cotton. You could even use sewing thread, maybe just double it up a few times. And so I don't have green, so I'm improvising. So this is going to be my bottom layer. So I'm just going to make myself a little code here, and I just printed this out on my computer. And if I had cardstock, An easy solution would be to just print this on cardstock, and that would give you a little bit of stability. The other option that my amazing cousin Kim suggested to me was to use these mailers, right? We all get these postcards in the mail that are kind of stiff, and usually they just end up in the recycle. And you know what? That one looks like it's the perfect size. So what I'm gonna try, I think this will work best if I glue onto here. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. Let's flip this over and glue it down because I'm gonna cut it out. And you know, traditional stencils, you cut out the middle, which is, you know, wonderful if you have an X-Acto knife. But once again, a lot of us are stuck at home and we don't have all of our usual things. And so I'm thinking that we're going to try this the opposite way. I also got tape out as a possibility. So we'll see how this goes. So I've glued. I'm just smoothing it out a little bit because it's wrinkling. And I got everything on there. And then I'm going to cut it out. For this part, you definitely want to use not your sewing scissors, right? Use your paper scissors. And I'm going to cut out around the outside. Like I said, since I don't have an X-Acto knife, I'm going to do this kind of the opposite of the traditional stencil technique because I'm using what I have. And what I have is a printout. So I'm going to cut around close to the edges. And I'm going to cut all these out. So I will meet you back here after I'm done cutting. Because my design is complicated, I decided I better have an original copy of the stencil so that I could see the placement more clearly. But if you're doing more of a free form kind of arrangement, you don't need to worry about this. Now for the fun part, we're going to get into the design. So I've laid out my t-shirt and tried to smooth it as much as I can. And you'll notice I'm using Crayola washable markers. Now, if you happen to have a fabric pen, you know, feel free, but you can get a package of these for the same price as one special fabric marker. And you might have some of these floating around if you have kids. So washable markers are our friends because they're washable. So I'm going to start in the middle because that's where my holes are that I want to make sure that I cut out. So what's going to end up happening is we're going to trace the stencil pieces and sew along those lines, and then we're going to cut out the middle. So I want to double check that my holes end up getting cut out. And it looks like I might just be able to get, they're a little bit off, so I'm trying to decide. So what I might do is move this down and then do another layer or do something there. I'm trying to decide. If you don't have holes, then you don't have to worry about this. But basically you're going to cut about 1/8 of an inch in from the lines. So I'm just going to worry about these bottom ones for now. And then I'll deal with that little one that's up there in a minute. So mine is a little bit more particular with the layout. If you know you're doing more of a freeform thing, then feel free to kind of just arrange however you want them to be. So I'm going to hold this down and trace around it. And I'm not going to stress out if it's not perfect, because either way it's going to look really cool when we're done, and I don't think anyone's going to be looking that close. So give yourself some grace. Feel free to be a little freeform and creative. Move your stencils where you want them and then trace around them. It doesn't have to be beautiful because it's going to wash out later and we're going to sew over it. So we're going to do this wherever you want your design. So if you want your design in the front, if you want your design all the way around, if you want it to go all the way up, you're the designer, so feel free to be creative and take this in whatever direction you want. So this part's going to take a while, so just have fun with it. Take your time. I'm using different colors because I'm going to use different colors of thread. It definitely looks great in one color, so don't feel like you need to copy that. You can do whatever you want. You're the designer, so have fun. I realized as I was doing this that one of the benefits of doing what I'll call the reverse stencil technique is that it really freed me up to be creative with the design. So this is what I started out with, but then I was trying to work around some little tiny holes, and this is what I ended up with. And I think it's going to look really cool. It doesn't look exactly like the original, but that's the fun part. And, you know, now I can take these shapes and I'm thinking I might continue some leaves and just some random things along the sides and maybe around the back. So feel free to add as much or as little as you want and place things in a way that's interesting to you, because this is going to be your very own unique t-shirt and it's going to express what you like. And I think that's really exciting. This next step, you're going to want some safety pins. You can use regular pins, but then you have a higher chance of stabbing yourself. If that's all you have, of course you can use that. But if you have safety pins, that will make your life a lot easier. And I'm going to start by putting the other t-shirt inside, or if you have a piece of fabric. This is the part that's going to take a little bit of time, but you want to try to line up the seams and the edges and put pins maybe every 4 inches or so, just enough to kind of hold them together. So I'm going to start at the sides down here at the bottom and line those up and pin them. It doesn't matter which direction the pins are going. And then you can match up your seams and find the middle and pin the middle. So this will take you a little bit of time to set up your fabrics, and then after that I will show you the design part, which will be super fun. So go ahead and keep pinning. A couple of tricks that I wanted to mention: you will probably be more successful if you open this up over like a table so you don't accidentally pin it shut. And the other thing that I'm doing to give myself more coverage with the pins is I'm kind of staggering them. So they're not exactly, so they're staggered this way, they're kind of lined up this way so that you can securely hold the layers together. So try that and see if that works for you. I want to show you the whole basic technique so that you can see what to do and get started, and then of course we can meet back together when we're done, but it'll take a little bit of time. So I am fortunate to have embroidery floss, and I do like to double my thread and knot the ends together so I don't have to worry about my needle falling off. But of course you can do it the more traditional way and just knot one end. So to start off with, I'm going to cut a piece across my body because I'm going to fold it in half. If you're not going to fold it in half, then you can just go from your nose to the end of your arm, and that's a good amount. Now the tricky part is I don't want it this thick. It is going to be doubled. So since there are 6 strands on the embroidery floss, I am going to take out 2. And this works really well if you have a friend who can hold the end for you. Feel free to recruit somebody to do that for you. Otherwise, you can do it yourself, and I'm just doing it with my hands. Some people do like to put this tail in their mouth, which is kind of gross, but it works. Of course, now I'm getting tangled. So I'm going to separate this out, and then I'll save my other pieces for later because I will need them. That didn't go too bad. So I just like to wrap it around my fingers to keep it kind of nice and set that aside. After I thread my needle, I have a trick for making the knot. I do like to bring my ends together, but you can do this with just one end. And I'm going to bring my needle up and my thread up so it makes kind of a smiley face. Point them at each other, lay the thread on top of your needle, grab it with your right hand or switch it if you're left-handed. Wrap about 4 or 5 times with your left hand. Pinch with either fingers, really, whatever's comfortable. But the trick is don't let go. And we're going to pull the pointy end of the needle while you keep pinching. And you should end up with a nice knot. There will always be a tail, but you can just cut that off, no problem. For the stitching, I like to do a back stitch. So I'm going to start with one of my leaves, And I'm actually going to move one of these pins over just so that my leaf is surrounded with pins. So feel free to rearrange if you need to. And I'm right-handed again, so I'm going to be going right to left with my back stitch. So I'm going to just pick one of my corners and I'm going to come in. I like to make my stitches about 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to come in about 1/8 of an inch from the corner, go back, come out in front, double check that you're going all the way through, and then pull through. So I'm always making one stitch and starting another. You could even put this in an embroidery hoop if that makes you more comfortable. So go back, touch your last stitch, come out in front, finish one, hopefully it doesn't tangle on you, and start another one. Straighten that out. So just keep an eye, don't make them too tight. Go back, come out in front, and we're just going to continue this. Oh my goodness, my thread is tangling a lot. If you have it, you might want to wax or soap. Run your thread along a piece of wax or a piece of soap, and sometimes that helps it to behave a little bit better. Mine's being difficult because I'm making a video. And you're just going to continue all the way around your shape, and then I will show you the next part. I thought you might want to see this a little bit closer. So once again, with the back stitch, the trick is starting a little bit in front and then going behind, coming out in front. So I'm always finishing one stitch and starting another. And of course I picked gray on gray, so it's harder for you to see. So I'll have to show you again maybe when I get to the red. So go back, touch your last stitch, come out in front. Go back, touch your last stitch, come out in front. You could do a running stitch, but I would really recommend doing the back stitch because it's going to be more durable and hold your t-shirt together better for longer. I am getting closer to running out of my thread. So the rule that I usually say is if you have 4 fingers left, it's a good time to stop. So I have a little more than that, but I'm going to go ahead and stop so I can show you how to end. So go ahead and take one more stitch so that you're through on the back side. And then on the back, since we have these nice stitches, I'm just going to sew through the stitches, make a loop, sew through the loop, and pull it tight. And I'm going to do that a couple times. So make a loop, sew through the loop, pull it tight to make a knot. That's the easy way to make a knot. If you run out of thread, then you have to tie it by hand. So I recommend making sure you stop, even though it's tempting to keep going. We can cut it a little closer than that. And I'm going to need some more thread to finish up. I finished my leaf, and you've probably noticed this is a pretty labor-intensive project. And I agree, it is, but if you enjoy handwork and you want something different, I think you'll find that the results are stunning and it's worth it. If you have a pair of little tiny pointy scissors, I bought these specifically for this because I was doing a bunch of it. And they're definitely easier. If all you have are your regular sharp sewing scissors, those will work too. Either way, you just have to be careful. So this is the exciting part. And what we're gonna do is carefully, so I would suggest starting in the middle. Carefully, I would cut a little opening in the middle of your shape. And then we're gonna go to about 1/4 of an inch from the edge of your stitching. And we're gonna cut and we're gonna leave a little border of fabric. And you'll notice it definitely is easier with these little tiny scissors, but we're making do with what we have, and you can do it with your regular scissors. Just keep an eye on what you're doing. So once again, about 1/4 of an inch. You don't need to measure. And part of the beauty of handmade items is that they're handmade and they're not exactly perfect. They don't have that mechanical perfection. And that I think is really exciting. So what you'll end up with is this cutout with stitching and the other layer showing through. So you can imagine when I get done, this is going to be really, really fun. And it is going to take a while, but we'll meet back when we finish and you can see the final result. After you finish all your stitching and finish all your trimming, then if you only did part of the shirt, I would go ahead and flip it and cut off the extra fabric. If you did embroidery and cutting, you know, everywhere, you could leave the shirts connected, but otherwise, let's just cut around. I'm gonna leave, I don't know, half an inch. I don't think it really matters. So just trim around the general outline, just so you don't have a bunch of extra fabric in your way when you wear it. And then we can save this other piece. If you have leftovers, we'll save it and come up with another project for it later. Or you could use it on another shirt that the color works with. Or I've even done this on cute knit dresses. So kind of the sky's the limit. I think it's a fun technique that gives new life to things. And if you have, you know, little leftover pieces of knit fabric, they work great for this too. So I'm just going to trim all that and save this piece for later. And then I can flip it back and we're all done. So there you go.